This is Keith Ward with Visual Studio Magazine, and joining me now is one of our speakers here this week at Visual Studio Live Chicago, Nick Landry. Nick, welcome.
Thank you. How do you do?
One of your specialties is Windows Phone and developing Windows Phone applications. So what are some of the questions that developers will have? Because a lot of them are still sort of exploring that. What are some of the concerns that they come to you with?
When it comes to Windows Phone, I guess the first question that developers have is why should they care? Because it's true that Windows Phone, it's growing, but it's still struggling because depending on the numbers you look at, Windows Phone is around maybe 4% market share worldwide. In some countries like Italy and Brazil, it's actually in the double digits, but mostly people are going to look primarily at iOS and Android first as their platform of choice. However, .NET developers already have the skill set to start building applications for Windows Phone very easily. They already know Visual Studio, they already know C#, and they already know .NET, so it's very easy to jump into Windows Phone development, and they can get up and running in no time. Now, the question is, why should they do it? So it's true that today there's not as many users as there are on other platforms, but I see a lot of reasons why people should care about it. Because first of all, it's a great way to experiment with new technologies. There's a lot of developers out there that they're deep in the trenches working on production projects that are using Windows Forms and maybe older versions of .NET. They don't have the luxury of always using the latest and greatest technologies. Working with Windows Phone allows them to use the latest version of C# and latest version of .NET and WinRT and experiment with async framework, for example, and basically sharpen their skills as developers within an actual project. And they don't have to wait for their companies to start doing Windows Phone projects. They can just be weekend warriors, take some time, maybe like evenings and weekends, build an app, learn how to do it, publish something. The other thing is, sooner or later, developers are going to it's going to become a little more competitive to get better jobs, or the jobs that everybody wants. And while we have a very low unemployment rate as developers, we all want those like highly coveted jobs that pay more, the cool projects, exciting projects. If you show up for a job interview, or if you send a resume and you have a portfolio of apps that you've built, you can actually show code that's living in the store with hundreds or potentially thousands of users that are already using it. If you have high star ratings for your apps, immediately it gives you a better developer profile. And if you don't do it, other developers will eventually. So you want to be part of those pioneers that will suddenly send a resume with maybe a couple of QR codes pointing to your apps in the store, because you can then bubble up away from the pack and then basically have a high profile compared to other developers.
Now, for Windows Phone development, there's a strong integration with Windows Azure on the back end. Can you talk a little bit about what you get if you're integrating Azure with your Windows Phone development?
Yeah, you actually get a lot, and that's where actually Microsoft has kind of democratized like cloud development, because they pretty much put everybody on the same level. Microsoft introduced this great Windows Azure mobile services, and it allows you to very easily create an application, deploy it, and then in the cloud you're going to have these components that can support your applications. Applications running on the phone or on a tablet, they don't exist in a vacuum. Sooner or later, you're going to have to take data from the user, save it in the cloud, so that you can create a more like connected scenario. If you have the same app on Windows 8, on Windows Phone, or even iOS or Android, maybe users are going to want to log into an account with their Facebook account or their Google account or Microsoft or Twitter, and then get access to their data, whichever platform they're using. So Azure makes that very easy because it provides authentication via mobile services. You can do push. It's actually a talk that I'm doing today on showing how to do push across those different platforms, including Android and iOS. And it makes it very easy to create an application that's going to go and save stuff in the cloud and then retrieve it later. And you can literally be up and running in less than 10 minutes building an application for Windows Phone or iOS using Windows Azure mobile services. So it creates a skeleton app for you, pre-made, that you can then start learning from, extend the app. And it's actually pretty phenomenal. And they already support Windows Phone, Windows 8, iOS, Android, and even HTML developers, whether they're building a website, a mobile website, or even wrapping it up as an hybrid app using PhoneGap.
So finally, not directly dev-related, but certainly indirectly related, developers want to know that there's a market a lot of times before they will start building apps for a platform. In your opinion, is Windows Phone here to stay? Is this market going to increase, giving these potential Windows Phone developers the confidence that if they do spend the resources making an app, that they're going to make some money on it?
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's a lot of good news there because, first of all, Windows Phone today may have around 4% market share, but since there's fewer apps in the store, and there's still 145,000, but the thing is it's easier for a developer to create something that's going to be noticed. Mm-hmm. There's still a need for a lot of great apps in the Windows Phone store. Whereas, for example, on iOS, it's very competitive. Mm-hmm. There's 800,000 applications. Developers that go into mobility will usually target iOS first. They've got access to designers that use those Macs. They create these beautiful apps. So the competition is very, very harsh on the iOS side of things. Same thing with Android. With Windows Phone, it's easier to be noticed, and it's a platform that's growing as well. Whereas all the others are kind of plateauing. iOS has lost even a couple percent. Android is still dominating, but it's very hard to target Android because to claim that 75% market share, you literally have to support hundreds of devices. Mm-hmm. So you'll have to make a choice at some point and say, I'll only support a top 30 devices, and then at that point, you're only maybe targeting 30% of the market. So with Windows Phone, it's easier to create an app, but all users will be able to use. It's still an uphill battle, and Windows Phone is growing. So it's maybe at 4% today, but it grew 80% over the last year. So it's a platform that's growing. It's definitely the third ecosystem, and it looks very promising. It's just that, we're in it for the long run. Right. It's not like just a sprint, it's a marathon.
And Microsoft certainly seems committed to the platform too. So, Nick Landry, Infragistics, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.